Easter to all of you. Let me express my thanks for all the beautiful music of the morning. It's wonderful. And thanks to all who put the Easter lilies in and the flower cross. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen the flower cross, go out that door and see it. It's just beautiful. What a wonderful day, glorious day. Welcome to all. The new sound system is in. On Tuesday, they're going to tweak the new speakers, and if it's a little hard to hear right on the first, can y'all hear okay? Okay, a little bit. Well, that's why they were roped off at first. But we wanted you to sit down, so if you can't hear anything, at least I look good today. So anyway, just eat it. All right. When I was growing up, my dad was a Methodist minister. Parsonages were located next door to the church. We grew up next door to the church. And most parsonages had cemeteries right in the back of them. And it was just wonderful to grow up as a little boy and look out your bedroom window and see tombstones. That's when I became a very afraid child. We would play in the cemetery during the day as long as Mother wasn't watching. We'd go out and play in the cemetery. We were real brave in the daytime, but at night I was scared to death. Could not stand to look out my window. Finally, we moved to a church where the parsonage was actually across the street from the church, and there was a school behind there. And I thought, I'm rid of the cemetery, thanks be to God. Well, you know, we moved in June, and that summer, we were playing outside one morning when my dad went to take out the garbage can, and when he opened the lid, there was the corpse of a man in it. What had happened was the night before, there had been a fight, and a man was killed, and he didn't know what to do with the body, so he put it in our garbage can. If you thought I was scared looking at tombstones, I still get, my heart races when I take the garbage out. I tell my wife I just shouldn't have to take the garbage out, you know? It was just horrible. It was horrible. What I learned early in my life is that cemeteries can be just about anywhere. Cemeteries are wherever we feel dead, hopeless, where all seems lost, where we feel afraid or rejected or ashamed. I would remind you that Easter begins in the dark, in the early morning darkness, in a cemetery. Mary went to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus for burial, and she is shattered inside. Not only did she grieve the loss of Jesus as a friend, as a part of the human race, but all of the dreams and all of the visions and the hope that he preached and taught and did, it was all lost. It was all gone. We don't expect much from cemeteries, do we? Now, in my job, I'm in cemeteries a lot. Maybe you don't go to them very often, but we don't expect much from them. And Mary's crying. She's crying from the depths of her whole being. I'm with people all the time in cemeteries. I've been with those who had to bury a child, a young person, a spouse, a parent, a grandparent. Every time I'm in a cemetery, I'm more acutely aware of my own mortality. Mary is at the tomb, and the stone has been rolled away, and she runs and tells Peter, and it says the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. I think that's interesting. Most biblical scholars think it's the Gospel of John, the writer of John, being real humble, not wanting to say, well, he loved me more than the rest of the others. We have children that think that too, don't we? But the disciple that Jesus loved ran to. But it's interesting, the disciple Jesus loved ran to the tomb and just looked inside of it, but he didn't go in. And then here comes Peter. Have you ever had those people who just rush right in, and he just rushes and goes right on into the tomb? And then once he goes in, the other disciple goes in, and they notice the linen cloths are rolled up, and it says, and they believed. Now, what we don't know, but it seems like they must have gone back home, but Mary's still standing outside crying. And when she looks in the tomb, she sees his angels, and she says, what have you done with the body of Jesus? Where have you laid him? And she hears this voice saying, who are you looking for? And she turns around, thinking it's a gardener, and he says to her, Mary. He calls her by name. She recognizes his voice. And what she wants to do is reach out and hug him. She's so excited, and he says, no. Don't hold on to me. Don't hold on to me. I haven't gone to the Father yet. Wonder what he meant by that. He tells her to go and tell the other disciples what she's experienced, and she rushes off shouting, I've seen the Lord. That's pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? Right there in a cemetery, the greatest miracle of all human history. Is it true? Can real life come from death? Well, I want you to know, just a couple months ago, I had a burial service in a cemetery I had not been in many years. And I got there early because I did not know how to get there. It had been a long time, and I didn't realize till I got there it had actually been 14 years since I've been in this cemetery. And all I remembered of that cemetery was I had the committal of a little boy, a little baby boy. And I thought to myself, he was only the third child buried in that cemetery. It was a fairly new cemetery, and I thought, I'm going to go find his grave. I want to see it, because of course when you do a committal, you don't have the tombstone in or anything. And I thought, I want to go see if I can find it. And when I made my way over, there were probably 60 or 70 new baby graves since I was there. And I thought, oh dear, I'm not going to be able to find it. And I made my way and I searched, and finally I found the grave. And I just stood over looking at it, and I remembered to myself, I will never forget it as long as I live. In 2000, we were in the other church, the other sanctuary. This young couple came out, and I'd never seen them before. It was their first Sunday at church. And usually I don't say this because I've been wrong before, but I said, you're having a baby, aren't you? You see, you have to be careful saying things like that sometimes. But I knew she was great with child, and so I said, you're gonna have a baby? And she said, yes, on Friday. I said, well, call me and let me celebrate with you. And I was so excited. They seemed like such a fine young couple. Well, the next day, I got a call from this mother-to-be, and she said, we're on our way to the hospital. I'm going to give birth. The baby is dead. And so I went to Northside Hospital and was there when this little boy was delivered, and I baptized him. Over these 14 years, that couple have become very close to my heart. Dear friends, I've had the honor of baptizing their other children, and they've been a blessing to so many people and to me. But what I want you to know is right there in the cemetery, I had a resurrection experience. It occurred to me as I was looking at that little boy's grave and remembering that I wouldn't know this couple had it not been for him. I wouldn't know them the way I know them had it not been for his life. Many people have been touched by this couple and the way they have lived their faith from the loss of a child. So many lives have been touched, and my life has been transformed because of this little boy. And I want you to know, I ran out of the cemetery, literally. I ran out and jumped in my car, and I called them on the phone. They weren't home, but I left a message. And I said, I've just visited with your little boy here in the cemetery. And I want to give thanks to him for bringing us together. Though he is dead, he has brought us life. He has brought us life. Had I only remembered that little boy just as he was, I could never have had such a transformative experience of remembering all that he's brought to our lives. And I think that's why Jesus said to Mary, don't hold on to me, because you're going to experience me in a greater way, in a lot greater way. Don't hold on to me just the way I was. You're going to experience me in a greater way. Too often we think of situations that happen in our lives as hopeless, and they become as cemeteries to us. And you know what I mean. The spouse comes home and says, I don't love you anymore. I want out of the marriage. And you know what that does? It puts us in the cemetery. There are those who are waiting the doctor's report who are scared to death, and it puts us in the cemetery. There are those who wait by the phone because they know their children or a child of theirs is not living the way they should, and they expect either the police to call or the morgue to call with bad news, and it puts them in the cemetery. A friend that we've loved for years betrays us, and it puts us in the cemetery. We can identify with Mary, can't we? Weeping when all seems lost. Oh, how we need Easter. We need resurrection because it promises us that in the end, wrongs are made right, that death loses and hope triumphs and life and love prevail. Easter is God's way of ushering in a new world with freshness and joy and peace. That's why Easter is always in the springtime. After the death of winter, we experience resurrection. And look at these Easter lilies that are so gorgeous, the flower crowns, the beauty. We see recreation, new life, and we can't but want to get out and participate in it. What do we do with our Easter experience? Our job as the people of Jesus Christ is to bear witness to the resurrection. Oh, we can't go around proving Easter. We can only be a witness to it. And that's what the mission of the church is about, is to bear witness to Easter. Horrible things happen in life. I'm still overwhelmingly perplexed in a world with as advanced technology as we have. We cannot find that Malaysian airplane. Breaks my heart for those families who are waiting to hear that their loved ones have been found. The South Korean ferry overturns, killing over 260-something people. We read of killings and abuse and fires and earthquakes, hurricanes and school shootings. Reality is pretty harsh, isn't it? But because of Easter, we can know with certainty that God's love is stronger than all of this. God is at work in the world in ways we cannot know unless we quit boxing God in and quit holding on to old stereotypical images of God and let God be God. Let God loose in the cemeteries of your life and let God bring resurrection to us. The cross is the symbol that God can take something negative and turn it into a positive as a means of grace. The first sermon ever preached after the resurrection of Jesus was Mary screaming down the way, "He is risen, he is risen." Churches all over the world today, millions of churches and millions of people are going to hear the same sermon. It's the same sermon. He is risen. He is risen from the dead. But how do we know he's risen? You ask me how I know he lives? He lives within my heart. Do people see the Christ in you? Can they tell Easter is real because of Jesus in you? I heard about a man, true story, who played the role of Jesus in the Passion Play in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And as he was they were practicing, and as he was carrying the cross up the hill, there were tourists there who were there for the Passion Play looking for it. And there was a heckler in the crowd, and he started heckling the man playing Jesus. And the fella just got he was belligerent, and the fella carrying the cross was so mad he went over, dropped the cross, and went over and just punched the guy. And the director of the play came over to him and said, "You can't do that. You're playing Jesus. For crying out loud. You can't do it." The next day, same heckler was back, fell over the cross, and he was worse than ever. Fella dropped the cross, went over and punched him again. And the director came up to him and said, "You're fired. You are fired. We cannot have a Jesus that acts like this." And the fella said, "Just give me one more chance. Just give me one more chance. I promise I'm going to do it right this time. I'll do it right this time." So the next day, the dress rehearsal, the same heckler was there. The fella playing Jesus had the cross, and the fella was worse than ever. And the fella drops the cross, and he goes up to the man and says, "Meet me in the alley after the resurrection." People see Jesus in you. The proof of the resurrection is that Christ is in you and me. I was at Egg Harbor Cafe. I love that restaurant. They don't pay me to say this. It's a good restaurant. And when I go, they always say the usual. And I go, "Yeah, that's right, the usual," because I just love it so much. I was eating breakfast there Thursday morning. As I was eating breakfast, this couple came in. I'd seen them before, didn't know them well. And I thought, where have I seen them before? And they came up to me, and I stood up, and I greeted them, and they said, "We remember you. You were Arnold Gardner's preacher." and friend. We were at his funeral. Arnold was a member of this church. He died 7 years ago at the age of 48 from malignant melanoma. And so we talked for a few minutes about him and the family. And as this couple turned to leave, the woman turned back to me, and there was another witness to this because I was with a person here in the church. And the wife said this to me. She said, if ever there was proof that Jesus walked on earth, you could see it in him. And I said, you're right. You're right. You could see it in Arnold Gardner, the Christ. Have you experienced the one whose love was so powerful even death could not contain it, a love that never dies? The early disciples did, and they gave their lives. Did you realize all the disciples, they gave their lives for this Christ? Would you give your life for a lie, for a myth, for a mere story? Mary risked her life because women were not supposed to talk in public, but she risked her life, particularly coming from a cemetery screaming, he is risen, he is risen. But that's what she did. Jesus' disciples have been telling the story now for many centuries. Do we know it well enough to tell and to live? I close with this true story. Hollywood made a movie a few years ago, True Story, absolute true story. And it's about Cricket and Kim Carpenter. I don't know if you know those names, if they're familiar to you. Cricket and Kim Carpenter, true story. They got married in 1993. And 3 weeks after their wedding, they were in a horrific automobile accident. The doctors did not think Cricket would live, but she did, and the trauma caused to her brain caused retrograde amnesia, and it erased her entire memory from 18 months before, including any recollection of the man she married. She never remembered him. The name of the movie is The Vow. I don't know if you saw it with Channing Tatum and Rachel McAdams. The nurse came into her room 3 weeks after that wreck and said, Cricket, do you know what year it is? She said 1969. She didn't know the year. Asked her parents' name. She remembered her parents' name and said, tell me your husband's name. She said, I've never been married. She didn't remember him at all. Her husband was a complete stranger, and she felt nothing for him. When he visited her, she would tell the nurse, that man irritates me. Get him out. I don't want him to come in. Do you know he courted her all over again? He could not let her go, even though she remembered nothing at all about him. And one of the critical lines of the movie that I think is just phenomenal. He says to her, even in all of our pain, I cannot let you go. I can't let you go. And on Valentine's Day, 1995, Kim proposed again, and she accepted. May the 25th, they had another wedding. And they exchanged rings, and he had engraved these words. Only one thing can surpass forever the painful events we have felt. And that is my love for you. My love for you. I want you to know that centuries ago, God proved God's love to the world through another carpenter. His name was Jesus. You see, like him to Cricket, God's just hopelessly, helplessly in love with all of us and could not let death win. God cannot ever let us go. And Easter says to us all that God is in love with us and will not let us go. Mary left the cemetery shouting, he is risen. And because of the resurrection of Jesus, our cemeteries can be left behind. For there is nothing, 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 not even death, that can ever keep us from God's love. That makes me want to shout, hallelujah. How about you? Let's do that. Say it, hallelujah. 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 He is risen. He is risen. He is risen indeed. He is risen indeed. Now go out and tell it and live it for all the world to see and to know in the name of the risen Christ. Amen.